Desiree asked me to pop on here and just go over a few points that are, to me, as an agent, I guess the most common things that are coming up in insurance lately, or actually have always been, but really significantly now. And to give you a little bit of background, we've been in business since 1989. We have 3 offices in Wilmington, Wilmington, Leland, and Southport. And we specialize in coastal property and personal and commercial insurance. And we have 25 agents that write between all 3 of our offices. And why use FinPoint Insurance? Because you have everyone. No, just kidding.
I'm Danielle with FinPoint Insurance.
We have access to over 50 different markets. I know Desiree said that Nikki's from Myrtle Beach, and I can also write in South Carolina as well. We can do some Tennessee and some Virginia, but mainly North and South Carolina. If you ask me specifically to do a quote for you, I have a 1-day turnaround. Or if I can't do that, I'm going to at least communicate that with you and let you know that I'm working on it and give you a time frame of when I would have it back. And I guess the biggest part about us that sets us apart and me as an agent is our customer service side. Without that, we just don't have clients, and you have to nurture the client and treat them, like their family, which is how I tend to treat all of my clients. So we just take pride in our customer service. In fact, our Southport office, I think, is being recognized
I'm Danielle
by the
with
Chamber
FinPoint Insurance, and thank you
on
for
Friday
letting
for
me
a
be here
customer
today.
service award, and we just won Best Insurance Agency in Cape Fear. And we were super excited about that too. So you'll see that on our Instagram for that. I guess do you want me to talk about the insurance for older homes now, Desiree, or did you have a timeline of what you want?
Nope, you go ahead and talk about whatever you want. I think though that is really important.
I think that yes,
the roofs,
the age of the home is just so important right now, as far as when I'm quoting. And when I say older homes, people are like, well, what do you constitute an older home? And anything really now 2005 and going back the other way is really going to be considered an older home, because they're really going to want to know about the updates to the home. So whenever I get a quote request from a realtor, if it's not a new home, I still need to know, to get a proper quote, the age of the roof, electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. But I'm going to go over kind of a list of what I would ask if I have the opportunity to do so when I'm presented the quote. A lot of times it could be from a lender, or just, a realtor is shopping 3 different people and we don't have all the information. But occupancy type, that's going to be a big one, because I need to know if it's primary, secondary. Are you going to be renting it out? Like, how many weeks are you going to be renting it?
Hey everyone. I'm Danielle with
the
FinPoint
ownership
Insurance.
type is another big one. Whether it's, I will always ask you, how's the property going to be deeded? Because if it's deeded in an LLC or a trust, that can change things. Some carriers will not allow policies to be written in an LLC or a trust. Not many, but there are some. So, and then some carriers require the named insured and then the trust or the LLC to be listed as an additional insured, which is a good point to do that, because if the client wants an umbrella policy, the umbrella carriers will not write an umbrella if the home is deeded in a trust or an LLC. So it's only if it's in their personal name, which is a really good thing, because then we don't have to rewrite the policy and they're eligible for the umbrella if it's written in their name and add the LLC. So that's a big one I always ask. Credit can also affect a rate. That's why we ask for birth dates, because John Smith may get this rate, but Ann Smith may get this rate, but also could be, because of their credit. Claims history, another one I ask. Claims in the last 3 to 5 years, and claims can follow the address or it can follow the client. So it just depends on the carrier. I get location. Also, how far to the coast are you? Is it beach property? Is it, is it further inland? That's going to affect the premium. The coverage amount, that's, how much we insure the home for. Protection class, all of Wilmington is a PC1, which is great. We don't really have to worry about protection class here here locally. It's mainly when you get into the mountain areas where they have PC 9 and 10, and a lot of carriers will not write it because of that.
What
That
does
means
that mean?
distance to fire department. So, yeah, if it's over 5 miles, it's gonna be expensive. Because obviously the further they are from a fire department, the more of a risk it is if there's a fire, and burns the house down. Age of property, getting back to what I was saying about the 2005 is what I would constitute now, and older, we need to know about the roof age, number one. When was the HVAC replaced? And the other biggest one is the plumbing type in the house. If we could find out what it has, polybutylene was used mainly in the 90s. PEX was also used in the 90s. Those are also, PEX pipes are also not eligible with a lot of carriers if they're prior to 2010. Any PEX after 2010 is completely fine. But when I get a house, when I hear it's in 1990, and I always like make them find out what kind of plumbing it has, because when they go to do the inspection, they're gonna cancel the policy, and we don't want that to happen for many reasons. And if they were to have a claim before we found out, that could be an issue for the client. So we just want to make sure that we have all of our underwriting up front. Hot water heater age is another one. Frontline is a big carrier here in New Hanover, Brunswick County, and they cut off at 14 years, and they do not bargain that at all. It's a 14-year. It has to be replaced if you want to write with Frontline if it's over that age. And I just went over the plumbing. The other one is the dog breeds. That's asked on every application. If they have an aggressive breed of dog, they're not going to be eligible for most of our standard carriers, or anybody that, that would write a standard policy. And then swimming pools, trampolines, and solar panels. I'm finding solar panels are more common now, and that some carriers will not write them if they have solar panels. So we need to know the value of them as well if we are going to write them, because they would be considered in the coverage of the house, the coverage A of the home. And trampolines, pretty much no one will take. And swimming pools are fine as long as they're fenced and there's no diving board or slide. We're good with pools. That's an easy peasy one.
So when you say does the pool itself have to be enclosed, or just the property?
Just the property, a fence, yeah, a self-latching gate, it needs to be 4 feet high. I don't see any issues with pools. Most people now do not put a diving board or a slide. They just have it, they just have a pool in the backyard. And so I don't see issues with that at all. The main issues are the roof age and the plumbing when it's an older home. Just finding out those things. And most homes have circuit breakers. Some have the fuse boxes, which I don't ever really run across that. So we're really good there as well. On the roofs, the main carriers now, the cutoff about some are 10, some are 15, and some are 20, 25. But we're seeing, I guess the main would be 15 years now. And that's for architectural shingle roofs. Composition shingle roofs are really about 10 years. Those are the long squares. Metal, of course, is going to give you longer. And a hip roof is also going to give you a great discount on a policy. So I always check that. And I think I mentioned to Desiree, or maybe it was Lee, about the fortified, the Strengthen Your Roof program that NCJUA has come out with. The fortified roof can really save you money if you get that. If you're going to get your roof replaced, I would talk about getting it fortified, because there's different tiers for it. There's a bronze, silver, and a gold tier. And the gold is usually done when the home is built. And then the silver and the bronze is when you replace the roof. You get a certificate, and it can save a lot of money on a policy. So it's really good to ask that question if you're thinking of getting the roof replaced about that. But But yeah, that's all I really have on the underwriting, and it, again, that doesn't really apply to the newer homes. I don't need to know about any of that other than if it does have a pool, a trampoline, and the type of dog that is there that you have. But other than that, everything is good on a newer home.
What about the dog breed? What types?
So Pitbull's always on there. German Shepherd. I've seen Frontline doesn't allow Great Danes, which I think is crazy. Rottweiler. There's the little dog that was on the RCA commercials. I can't think of what he was that had the patch over his eye. That one's on there. And a couple more I can't think right off the top of my head. But and even if it's a mix, they still won't allow it, So I've got clients that I'm like, what kind is he? He's a lab mix. I'm like, he's a lab. So we go with he's a lab, or if I question it, I might say, they'll send me a picture like he's the sweetest dog in the world. But yeah, they will cancel a policy, a standard carrier, if they find out that there's one there. And then there are carriers that will write it, but they just exclude animal liability from the policy, which I've been here 10 years and I've seen maybe 2 claims come from an animal bite. So not a huge deal. But just questions that I will ask you up front. Any other questions on the older home?
What about historic homes, and if some of it's partial knob and tubing, some of it's not, and so it's been mixed,
Right. That's a good question. So that on all homeowner quotes, they ask if it's historic, and if you check yes, then it's usually going to be, we have carriers that will do replacement cost, but then there are carriers that will only do functional replacement cost, which functional replacement cost is they're going to replace it with like kind of materials of today's standards, not what it would have been, 100 years ago. So that we just have to weigh all of our options and see what would be the best fit there. But to answer your question about the half of it could be, knob and tube, or the other half is, circuit breakers, it would be something that I would have to submit to our underwriter, and usually they will approve it because they know it's historic. So, but that's another question they ask, is it on the historical registry? And they're looking, is it on a national historic registry? So downtown Wilmington is not national, it's local. So you are
Well,
good
we
there.
do have parts
Parts of it that are on the national. I guess I've run in only to the local ones.
Yeah, and I know the local here, as far as keeping up with standards, is actually is harder. They're more
Right.
stringent than the national one.
Than the national ones, yeah. What other questions, any other that pertain to that? No. And I told Desiree too, I'll touch on, well, flood insurance is another big one. I always quote flood for my clients whenever I get a quote request. I think that's kind of a self-explanatory topic now, after we saw what happened with Helene and then what happened down in Carolina Beach and Brunswick County. I always say, well, I'm not in a flood zone. Well, everybody technically is in a flood zone. And 30%, were you at that flood seminar, Desiree, that we did? I think Sean was there.
Sean was there. I was out of town, but I believe they have another one.
And I felt like that was super helpful. And it was 20%. And I believe they said in the FEMA rep said now it's 30% of all flood claims come from people that are not technically in a flood zone. Which, I think as real estate agents, I would definitely urge your clients to talk with their agent about flood insurance, because it's definitely real, and it can definitely ruin someone's life if you flood and you don't have any coverage at all, because it's always going to be a separate policy too. It's never included in the home.
Yeah, ever since Florence, in 2018, I recommended to everybody. I don't care where you live, just go ahead and get it. If there's a stream near you,
right, just get it.
I have it just in case, because you just never know. I'd rather be overinsured than not insured.
Right, exactly. And it only takes 1 inch of water to do $20,000 worth of damage too, because once it gets into the walls, you know, it seeps up and it's just a, you know, a huge problem. And at that seminar that Sean was at as well, they had this gentleman, he was a single older man. He looked like he was probably in his 70s, retired, and he purchased flood insurance. And the story was about, thank goodness I did, because he would have lost everything, like everything that he saved for and retired for would have been gone. But he was able to get flood insurance. And something that I found interesting that they mentioned in that as well is that if a client has building and content coverage, when they file, the contents usually gets paid quicker than the building. So if they do have a total loss, they could at least get started with, you know, the rebuild process if they've got content coverage. But most of the time, the lender is only requiring coverage for the building. They don't care if you have contents. And I would say 80% of my clients only purchase the building coverage because they're trying to suffice the loan. They don't want to pay for the extra, which is definitely going to cause the premium to go up. But it's a conversation that needs to happen with everybody that we're, including myself, and you as an agent should be having with your clients.
And can you quickly say what the difference is between flood insurance, you know, because I know some people say, oh, well, my policy covers it. It's not the same when when your water heater breaks versus
right,
you know,
exactly.
water coming in.
Flood description with flood and FEMA is it has to cover, I believe it's 2 or more acres, and it's rising water that enters the home from the outside inside. That is what a flood is. What happened in Helene, where the water kept rising, and it flooded everything. Totally different than if your house gets flooded from a hurricane, where because the roof came off and this happened and it rained in your house for 3 days, like it did in Florence, and flooded the home. That's going to be covered under your home policy, because the peril was actually wind that caused the flooding. So totally different than having a separate flood policy. And a flood policy is always going to have 2 separate deductibles, for the building and for the contents. So at most of my clients choose a $1,250 deductible. So they're going to be paying $2,500 total if they have a flood loss and they've got content coverage. So, but yeah. And Desiree, also, I mentioned about talking a little bit about auto insurance. I know it doesn't have anything to do with home, but we are going to be, let me go back a second. So the home policies they're all going to be taking a rate increase in June. The beaches, I believe are going to be 17%, and this is over 2 years. Our territory here in Wilmington will go up 12%, and then Leland and Brunswick will be 5%, and that's coming in June. I'm not sure when the date is, but will be coming. And the same with auto insurance. I believe they got an approval for that. I believe that may be August that's coming down the pipeline. And anybody that's got an inexperienced operator and you're adding them to your policy starting at that same time, and this was crazy to me, but they're rating the inexperienced operator gets rated for 3 years on a policy. It's going to 7 years. So people have already called our office like, we're not adding Sally to the policy, because yeah, Sally's gonna have to pay that rate for 7 years. 7 years. It's a new DOI that they're coming out with. So yeah, but if you already have them on the policy, you're gonna be grandfathered in. It's for any new drivers that you're adding. That's what everyone has said. Woo. Can you hear me, Desiree?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, because I'm not hearing you.
You can't.
Now I can. Okay, now I can.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit about auto insurance, and we will be seeing a rate increase on that, and the new tariffs that have been implemented are also going to affect that. We have been told, you know, all the parts that come from other countries into here, that's going to definitely affect our rates if we don't get that worked out sooner than later. So that's all I have to say on that, on the home part. What is your next point?
That was great. I have some questions here that people have written in. But before I do that, does anybody else have questions that they would like answered, or maybe even some clarification? A lot of that stuff is we deal with it all the time, so it makes sense to me, but it may not make sense to you. So the question is, what are some strategies to select and optimize insurance coverage for an intracoastal front home?
Like as far as getting the rate down, like to be
Yeah, I would
competitive.
think so. I think you may have probably answered that within your talk, but is there anything else that you think of that might
The fortified roof is definitely going to help but again, this would be if they're looking to replace their roof, see if they can put on a hip roof. That's going to really impact the rates when you get closer to the, intercoastal or beaches, as well. If it's in a gated community, which I doubt it would be in those areas, and then making sure that, the, burglar alarm, if you have a fire and burglar, that can also help as well.
So being in a gated community helps you with your insurance.
Yes, and the type of siding on a home too, can definitely impact it in a good way. If it's cement fiber, some carriers consider that brick, which you get a really good discount on a policy. Frontline is a good example. If a home is cement fiber or hardy plank, they consider it masonry veneer, which is it's a significant discount on the policy.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yep, and the amount of claims, if you have no claims, that's going to definitely help your rate, which I kind of touched over that too. Those are all going to be things that will help lower the rate.
If I wanted to find out what a claims history is on a property we're going to submit an offer on, are you
Yes.
able to tell me quickly?
Yep, I just need to know the birth date of your client, because that can impact, like I said, claims typically follow the insured, but it can also follow the property address, which I don't agree with, because, if they're purchasing the house, but that's just how some of the carriers are.
They didn't create the flood.
They didn't create the flood, but they might not take it because if it had 3 losses on it, they may not want it.
Yeah.
So but yeah, just the date of birth, and really to get an accurate quote, and then I can put all the numbers in, run the quotes, and see if there is a claims history there.
Okay.
Because sometimes clients may not want to tell you all the information. Well, especially on an auto, have you had any accidents? Oh no, I've had nothing. And then you pull up the quote and they've had 10.
Well, the good thing now is our new residential property disclosure requires the seller to say whether they've had any claims on the house. Now, they may have not known from the previous owner if they only had it a couple of years, but I think that's going to be helpful.
Oh, agreed.
Honest with it.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Do you offer long-term care insurance?
Nope, I don't, but I have a great referral source that I can share with you.
Okay.
It does.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, because I have somebody who
Yeah, I don't do any type of health insurance, but I have a great contact. He does our insurance for the business, but he's great. I send him all of my people. So
okay.
I'll get that for you.
The next is, are there any reforms for the insurance landscape on the horizon to help with insurability in weather stigmatized areas and to keep insurance affordable and available to homeowners?
Not sure on that one, because if we get hit with another storm, obviously that's going to make it even harder to say the least. I know that I have talked to agents in Florida and have been told that the insurance premiums, because a lot of the hurricanes happen there, but it affects our rates, that an average homeowner policy in Florida right now is $12,000. $12,000. It's crazy. So as long as we can keep the storms at bay and the carriers have good reassurance rates, or residuals, I think we'll be okay. I think we're in a position now where we're kind of leveling off on rates. I did see them start very low and then they went sky high and for the last 3 to 4 years, and now they're really kind of leveling off. I think where we are right now is probably where we're going to land, and we're all going to be, and more carriers are actually opening back up that are writing
okay.
business in North Carolina that had pulled out but are going to come back. So I
Okay,
think
great.
we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel as far as the crazy rates.
Okay, good, good. That's helpful because I always tell people to prepare maybe 10% increases a year just in case.
Yeah, but they can't keep adding 10% every year. I mean, it would just, there has to be, it has to stop somewhere. But I really think it's leveling out.
Great. Are you seeing more private insurers come in? Because I know that there's been talk of removing FEMA, which helps subsidize the flood insurance policies. That's why they're much less expensive. So have you seen more private carriers coming into the fold?
For flood, we have several private markets and they can be less than FEMA. In fact,
Oh.
I just wrote one this week, yesterday. It was significant. It was $600 less than FEMA.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, but you have to be careful with the, if a client wants to go from a private carrier to back to FEMA and they have a mortgage, there's a 30-day wait period. So we have to make sure that we don't create a lapse for the client when it comes to the mortgage. So that's the only caveat really about them, but we do have several markets for flood insurance as far as the private side goes. And on, I would Nationwide is coming back. They had been away for a while, but I think they're starting to write more now, and we may see them coming back by the third quarter, which would be helpful.
Yes,
So,
that's
yeah.
great. This has been just so helpful. Every year that you come on, you help me with my clients, talking with them about what to look for.
Right,
So
right.
I appreciate this.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm happy to do it.
Does anybody else have any questions that they
One last question I do have, or not question, but I wanted to touch on was, because we're seeing a lot of this in the market now, and admitted and non-admitted carriers. Which we write a lot of. Orion, I'm sure you've heard of Orion. That's a big one around here in Frontline. And Orion is a non-admitted carrier, and they are not backed by the state of North Carolina, which is what a non-admitted carrier is, versus an admitted carrier is backed by the state of North Carolina. So an admitted carrier will always, let me go back. A non-admitted carrier, there is a chance they could not pay out a claim if they went insolvent. Not for a standard carrier, they would always pay out a claim. But I have seen in the years that I've been here, the only carriers that have gone insolvent have been an admitted carrier, not a non-admitted carrier.
Oh.
Which is because people see that and they freak out, like, I don't want to be with a non-admitted carrier. It's really not a bad thing. They're still an A-rated company. They're going to give you plenty of warning if they are, going to go insolvent. They're going to give you plenty of warning to rewrite it somewhere else. So I just wouldn't let that freak out your clients.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
because we have a lot of non-admitted markets now, because we have to, or else we would have not enough options for our clients.
Yeah. Okay. In the chat, I did put your information so that if people want to get a hold of you, want to check in with your insurance, maybe reevaluate, which you should be doing every year, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, correct. And we have a team here. Alyssa works on my team with me, and she goes over renewals too with everybody every year. But we do, as an agency, that's part of our customer service, is reviewing your policies to make sure you have.
If you haven't had your policy looked at since 2020, you really need to, because you may be sorely underinsured.
Sure. Right. Exactly. Thank you for that, Desiree. Yes, it definitely want to look at that for sure.
Good, good. And when I send this out, I will make sure that your information is out there so that they have it. You will get a recording of this so you can replay it if you like. And please feel free to share this with your friends and family members that you think would benefit from this. Next month we have turnkey move managers coming to talk about helping people move from, their home into maybe assisted living communities and how you can help your parents or loved ones move transition. So that is our topic for next month. And we work with a lot of people in that situation. So it is important to know your options and that if your family members live out of state, that you don't have to do this all by yourself. So all right. Well, with that said, you guys have a wonderful day. Enjoy. Happy spring. And we will hopefully see you next month.
I
Bye,
appreciate it. Thank you so
Danielle.
much. Have a good one. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.